Okay, Tuesday evening, and before I forget, I shall show you all how to create the curved opening in a curved wall. First up, we shall create the wall. So the architecture tab, I use the wall tool, cancel that, and I use this basic wall. And first I'll draw a straight wall, okay, about 5 meters long, that's fine. That's back to front. For the purposes of this, I'm going to be looking from the south elevation. So another one. So to create another instance of this, I'll just right click on this wall and create similar, this option. So that will create another wall exactly the same. And this time I shall use the start end on to arc. So curved wall. Probably back to front as well. Yeah. Flip that one. I know it's back to front from the hatching. This is a brickwork hatch, that's a blockwork hatch. And it's also rendered on the inside. Third wall will be right click, create similar, a circular one. It doesn't actually end up circular, it ends up as two arcs. Okay, so that will do that one. And what do you know? Back to front as well. So I'll just move that in just a little bit. So you can see it's two separate hemispheres, or semicircle should I say, because it's not a sphere. So in the south elevation, we'll look at 3D first. So this is what we've got. Oh, I didn't swap that one around. So back to the floor plan and flip this one as well. So in 3D, this is what we got. Curve, tower type thing, and a flat plane. It's easier to use the wall opening in an elevation, I have discovered. So south elevation, they're all kind of 8 meters high. If I zoom in on this, you can see the hatching of these. Drafting hatch, there are two distinct types of hatch. The model-based hatch stays the same size depending on what I do to the view. Okay, that's not getting bigger or smaller, whereas a drafting style hatch that will change based on the scale. Okay, so it's all scale related. The drafting type hatch is one of these. So if we go into sort of this plan view at 1 to 100, it's that size. If I go into it at 1 to 10, it scrunches up. Okay, so that's a significant difference between that type of hatch and the one you see in kind of a 3D view on a 2D view as well. Okay, so aside there, oops, south elevation. So this is our flat plane, this is our park curve, and this is our turret type shape. So the wall opening, we can use that to create a rectangular. This is the key with this, has to be rectangular. And we're still in the elevation view. I've got to click on the wall first, and then I get no options up here, so nothing along there, nothing on this. So just create a shape. I got all these witness lines, so I can adjust the position of these and these, make these dimensions permanent, or I can just leave it like that. And after I've created it, if I select the actual opening itself, then I get the ability to adjust these things as well. Okay, so that's easier in elevation. Similarly, if I use the wall elevation, I have to select the wall first, so I select that, and then I can create this opening in that. So much easier than trying it in 3D. I think we were duped on that mini video about this thing. Yeah. Elevation is probably the easiest way to view that, or to create that. And similarly with this, even though this is in two parts, I can choose the wall elevation or the wall opening facility, click on this, and then create one in there. Okay, so that's fairly simple. we look in 3D, then this is what we've got. Okay, nothing ridiculous about that. The only problem is they are all rectangular. So let's step this back, 1, 2, 3, and look at editing profile. Now notice with this one, we don't get the edit profile option. This one we neither do. This one we can edit profile. So back to the south elevation with my kind of sketch mode set up, and I can create sort of all sorts of openings. In this I can use that, and it's telling me I've got highlighted lines overlapping. I'll deal with that in a minute. I can put holes in. I can fillet corners. I can do anything I like with this. Okay, this is the profile of that wall. I can even move the bottom edge, you know, up, or maybe grab that and just drag that up. And again, I've got this issue. Constraints are not satisfied. I'll remove the constraints of this. Then I've got a bit of tidying up to do. So first I'll use this split tool to split this wall. Now in fact, this is an extra line sitting on top of the one behind it. So what I'm best off doing is selecting this and just deleting it. So I've just got one line then behind it. One of the things that you'll find you do quite a lot when you use this tool, pick lines, is keep picking lines. And you keep thinking, you think, well, I've picked enough lines, and then you start clicking on other bits and pieces, but this pick lines option is still activated, and you'll overlap lines quite a few times. So when you try to create boundaries, you can't create them because there are extra lines in the way, and it can be frustrating. So I've got to trim out to this. So I basically need to split this line so I can trim this side and this side. An alternative method would be just to drag that down to there and just, you know, unjoin the elements. I'm getting all these sort of problems that are occurring all the time, which are unnecessary, and then pop that line back in there. And I can also just select this line and slide that up like so. So I've got this now profile. I might have a bit of an issue at this point, but it seems okay. And then I can say okay to that. And so I've now adjusted this, but notice that, you know, that dotted line represents the actual true size of that wall. Okay, so that's modifying the profile. This isn't creating sort of void openings or anything else. Wall opening, and the wall opening is rectangular only. So if I want to create a circular opening, I have to go a little bit further and create an object that can be used as the cookie cutter, for want of a better term. It's used quite a lot, and that will allow me to create a shape which can be extruded, and then I can use that extruded shape as a void object which can then be used to cut a hole in the surface. Sounds complicated, it's not really. So the other thing to point out is to create that cookie cutter shape, I need to generate a reference plane. So I can draw, really I'd want to draw perpendicular to this face, let's say, or if I did want to draw perpendicular to any face, then I'd have to put a reference plane in first and use that. So we might as well use this opportunity to just take a look at reference planes. So I'm going to go back to my level 0. I'm going to go to the work plane panel on this architecture tab, and we get it on the structure tab as well. I'm not so sure about other ones. It seems to appear quite a lot when you're creating objects. You've got to look for this sort of reference plane thing. Now this is different than a reference line. This is creating an infinite plane sort of in any direction. So reference plane can go this way. I can have a reference plane this way, reference plane this way. My horizontal reference planes are the levels, but that's not stopping me from putting in another reference plane that's coming down at this angle, or horizontal. So I can have as many reference planes as I want, and then these reference planes will appear in the set option. So I click on set, then I've got name, and they should, well, they don't appear there because I haven't named them. Or I can pick a plane and use these sorts of things or these things, and use that as the reference plane I'm going to work on. So all this will be revealed in a second. So I'm just going to get rid of that, go back to my level 0 and get rid of this, this and this. Now my reference plane for the purposes of ease will be kind of perpendicular to this. And I'll use it out here somewhere so I can use the same plane for both of them. So I'll click on reference plane, RP. I'll just click along there. And it doesn't have to stretch all the way over to this one because these things are infinitely sort of large, and anything sort of drawn once I choose this reference plane will be drawn on that reference plane, and I'll give you an example of that in a second. So I'm going to name this so it makes life easier. So if I click on that, I can either click on the name either side there, or I've got the name option up in the properties. So I'll click name. So I'll call it Warhol, as in Andy Warhol. Okay, so that's now referenced. So I can use this now as a reference plane. So if I was in 3D, for example, and I wanted to references, and I'll call it choose this one, say OK. Now that's out here somewhere. So if I then use the model line tool and start creating sort of shapes like so, I'll draw one over there, and I'll draw one out here somewhere, I'll draw one over there. So these look now that this is further back than this one, and this is kind of against that thing, and then this is further forward, but in reality they are all in the same plane because they're all being drawn on that reference plane. Okay, so we're not only showing whole options, we are showing reference plane options and how they function as well. So let's grab those and delete, and we'll go back to our south elevation, and lost one there. Let's delete that as well. And now we're going to create a component model in place. This is going to be a generic model that we can then use as a void object. So click on model in place. We'll go down to our options, which are generic models. These are categories, and the only one that's significantly different is the mass, which behaves slightly differently. And I'll say OK, and I'll call this Warhol 1. OK. Set my reference plane. Click on that. I'll choose a name and Warhol, and OK. Now I can then just show reference plane so I know that I'm in the right sort of direction, but I'm kind of confident that my Warhol reference plane is the one that I need. Now your options are to create an extrusion, a blend, a revolve. You can create all sorts of different shapes that will then cut into this surface. Void forms, I've got void extrusion, void blend, so I've got the same options there as I have here, but I'll use the solid forms first and then convert that into a void form so you know the difference between the two. So I'm going to choose a circle because this was the question: how do I make a circular for shape opening in a circular form? And so I shall just choose my position here, create that, and it doesn't have to be round, it can be all sorts of different shapes, and on this one I'll do a rounded rectangle. Okay, so that, and then I'll use the fillet to create those corner shapes. Oops, a daisy. So that's surplus to requirements, and this one, let's do that. Okay, so weird shape, round shape, and you know I don't have to draw them one at a time. I can draw them both together. So we'll click on the green tick just to see what we've actually got here. Back into 3D, so you can see actually all I've drawn is these two discs, which are 250mm deep and different shapes. So I'll just drag that so it comes through the object. This is the key to this. Okay. Then I can turn these into void forms, but I can't turn them into void forms when I'm in the project environment. I have to be back in the model environment. So I have to click edit in place. These little steps are absolutely crucial. So I can then click on these, and now I get this solid void object option. So this currently is a solid. If I click on this little panel here and the drop down, I can turn them into void objects. So they now turn to this sort of orangey colour. And even though they're void objects, they still don't actually cut the opening yet. I've got to use this function up here. Okay, cut geometry, and then the ability to repair it after with uncut. So I can click on cut, and it wants me to choose the surface that I'm going to cut first. So that, and then the object I'm going to use to cut with, bang. And that will create your opening. And again, I'm going to use the cut option, use this, and then I can choose that object there. Even though it's kind of disappeared because it's cut, I can still use it here. The other thing I can do with this cut form is kind of move it around as well. Okay, so I can still reposition it, and it'll then create different cuts. So it's like a shaft opening thing that we saw today. It behaves a bit like that. So just grab it and then move it back to position. It's quite useful. You know, all these sorts of little tricks that you can do in Revit. It's not just for boxes. We can start, you know, being quite creative with the process. Everything still has to be built, but this is how you do it. And then we finish the model, and to all intents and purposes, you can impress your friends. How do you manage that? Watch the video. Okay, so that's basically how to create a sort of non-rectilinear hole on a curved wall. All right. I'll do another one a bit later about how to create sort of a spline curve, because you don't get all these sorts of things in class. But if I wanted to create a spline, which I can do with a model line, this function. So you might want to create something a bit more creative. Okay, that's still on that surface plane. I can't use the wall tool to map to that, but I can create a wall following this shape using a different method, and I'll leave that for another video. Okay, so that's it for now. Have fun making strange holes in curved shapes.